Well, look, here we are again. I mean, my thoughts are first and foremost with the family of Charlie Kirk and his two young children and his friends, and also actually the people who were there yesterday, because what they witnessed must have had a deeply traumatic and profound effect on them. But what I'm deeply depressed about is that, 9.5 years after the murder of my sister, we're having the same conversation again about what our politics looks like, what political discourse looks like, how we can learn to disagree better, how we can engage with people who hold very different views from ourselves. And no matter how abhorrent you feel someone's views are, and I think in this case there's probably very little I would agree with Charlie Kirk about, there is absolutely no place in civilised society for political violence and clearly no place for murder. It's just tragic that we're having this conversation again. And to be honest, I'm sick of having it. But what can we do to change it? And we all have to look at ourselves and think about the responsibility we have to improve the state of our politics.
I mean, what do you think we can do to change it? I mean, you say change the tone, but we have a leader in America who, whilst on one hand criticising the discourse, is as fond as anybody of denigrating opponents in the strongest possible terms.
I think we all have a responsibility, no matter what our position is, whether we are people in public life, whether we are the media, to just learn to listen better to other people's views, to learn to disagree with respect and civility, to learn to explore and examine complex issues rather than trying to give simple solutions to matters which are obviously very, very complicated. We've had murders in this country. We had Sir David Amess killed several years after Joe was murdered. We've had attacks and physical violence towards people across the political spectrum in America and in this country. So we as political figures have to think about the language we use and how we conduct ourselves. We also have to look at the role of the media and social media. It's absolutely fine to disagree, and I am a huge advocate of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of choice, but I do think we have to consider the tone of our language and the complexity of things rather than automatically almost thinking that we're always right and thinking that other people are always wrong and picking a side on complicated and complex matters. And we've all got a duty. Lots of people are angry. I'm angry, believe me, I'm really furious about what's happened to my life. I didn't want to be an MP. I ended up in this situation because of the worst possible circumstances. But what I try and do with that anger is channel it into positive action. And I try and spend a lot more time with people I disagree with rather than those I agree with, because it's so important to hear different views and different perspectives on situations. So I just think we've all got a duty and a responsibility, because if not, this is going to get worse. Like I say, it's nearly 10 years since Joe was killed. Where are we at? We're no better off than we were then, and if anything, sadly, we're much worse off.
Well, that was going to be my next question. Do you think the tone of discourse has got worse rather than better over this time, despite the fact that we've lost Joe and David Amess?
Sadly, I probably do. I mean, I'm like a broken record on this subject. I've been saying these things for all those years. And what upsets me as much as anything is that good people will leave public life because of fears around safety. I mean, I had one of my colleagues has had horrible attacks on her office recently, bricks through windows, arson attacks. She's one of the nicest people you could hope to meet. And why would anybody stay in public life when that's the climate and the culture that we're having to deal with? And equally, why would anybody enter public life? Like most MPs, I spend a lot of time going to schools and talking about how important politics is and how important it is that good people step forward. Often I talk about how important it is that women step forward. But why would you put yourself forward into such a toxic culture and such a dangerous environment? I put a post out on social media last night about how dreadful this killing was, and then I got a huge pile-on of abuse. And I was trying to do the right thing about someone who, I probably profoundly disagree with on pretty much everything. But you put yourself in that situation and you just open yourself up to abuse and personal attacks. So it's really, really difficult to know what the answers are, but we've got to keep talking about it. We've got to keep acknowledging it is a problem and thinking about what we can do, whatever our role in society, to try and improve things for the good of everybody.
And we saw overnight another attack on a Labour MP, Sharon Hodgson's office attacked. Somebody has now been arrested over that, so we won't go into it in any great detail. But again, this is an example of something potentially, somebody potentially who wants to target somebody in particular spilling over from online into real life.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's who I was referring to. I wasn't sure if that information was in the public domain or not. But Sharon is one of the nicest people, never mind MPs, one of the nicest people you could hope to meet. And she's had these horrible, violent attacks on her office, which doesn't just have an impact on Sharon, obviously. What about her poor staff and her family and friends who have to see that and have to deal with that? And often, when people in public life are attacked, there is a greater impact on family, friends and staff who have to deal with those issues. We all must get used to it, which in itself is wrong. But what about those people around us who've done nothing wrong whatsoever and are having to deal with that? But I just think we can talk about having a temperature check and changing things, but I'm not sure that's happening. And I would say to all colleagues in Parliament and everybody across the country, have your views, have strong views. I have very strong views about lots of things, but I always try and be respectful to those who I disagree with on whatever issue it is. And actually, let's engage with each other in a civilised and respectful manner, no matter how delicate or difficult or complex the issues are. But we cannot replace those difficult, delicate conversations with violence under any circumstances.
And you talk about the other people that it impacts, and of course Charlie Kirk had 2 young children. Jo too, your sister, had 2 young children. I wonder how events like this affect them. It's an awful reminder.
It's horrific. It's horrific. Every time something like this happens, the repercussions are huge. But you're absolutely right. My first thought was 2 little kids are going to grow up without their dad. They're going to wake up this morning without their dad. And I know what that looks like and what that feels like. So no matter how strongly you feel about something, try and think about even somebody you really, really disagree with and really dislike, try and think about them first and foremost as a human being with a life and with a family and with friends. And let's challenge the ideas that we disagree with. Let's challenge them robustly. But let's not forget that we're all human beings, often doing very difficult jobs in very difficult circumstances, whether you are an MP or whether you are indeed a nurse or a taxi driver or a shop worker, because we see abuse all over the place now. This is not just about people in public life. You know, sports people, we had the things over the summer from tennis players and female football players who get huge amounts of abuse. They're just doing the sport they love, they're just doing their job. And as I say, you know, the local supermarket, we've got people wearing body cameras because they're scared for their safety. This is not the society that we need or want. And we all have to push back on it as much as we possibly can.
Indeed. Very, very wise words. Kim Leadbeater, really good to talk to you today. Thank you for joining us.